This third episode of Down in the Village and fourth in the series of monologues was written in 1985 as a reaction to particular government homophobia in the civil service and armed services. Its main objective, nonetheless, was to be funny. And now, Down in the Village, an everyday story of rural life. Today's episode, a proper English fairy. The coach finally got in at 20 to 2 in the morning. Well, it was stop-start all the way home, apparently, what with Johnny Palmer being sick and old Arthur having to stop for... Well, he's been having problems with his bladder, but he doesn't help himself by drinking so much. Not that he had so much to drink on the boat as Johnny Palmer did, apparently. Well, they all went off on this 2-day coach trip to Boulogne. I think the vicar organised it on purpose because he's had it in for the dramatic ever since the church hall burnt down on the last night of monologues Hall. Anyway, that's why we're doing the Gilbert and Sullivan in the TocH, because they haven't even started work on the new arts and leisure facility yet, though they have approved the plans. It's going to be on that piece of waste ground the other side of the Snorri, just around from Mr. Chow's new video shop. Still, that's all to come. At the moment, we're doing the TWIN CHARIVARI, or The Lass Who Loved a Yeoman by Gilbert and Sullivan. It's not one of the best known ones, though curiously enough, they did it at the Comprehensive over at Milton Sudbury a couple of years ago. Rather well, actually. Anyway, there's some lovely songs in it. There's, "Oh, heavy heart, what should he do?" Yeah. And, "Oh, for she's off to see Poo-Poo," yeah. And, and the lovely madrigal that they just sing at the end. Fa la 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 la, fa la 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 la, fa la 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 la, fa la 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 la. Yeah, well, a lot of people say they don't like Gilbert and Sullivan, but I think he wrote some lovely shows, and that's why I said, when Michael Biggleswick said he wasn't going to be in the dramatic anymore, I said I'd have a go at producing it. You know Michael Biggleswick from the Polytechnic, very arty. Well, he's keeping out of the dramatic for the moment, so he doesn't see so much of Mrs. Jones. You know, the editor's wife thinks she's the star. Not that she's going to be in the TWIN CHARIVARI. I mean, I wanted her to play Daisy Buttermeadow, but she said she wasn't going to be seen in public playing a bumboat woman, even after she found out what it was. So she's helping Miss Moss and Mr. Gregory in that, with the teas and that out the back. It's funny, they've been doing the teas for years, Miss Moss and Mrs. Gregory. Mrs. Gregory never helps, just Miss Moss and Mr. Gregory. What on earth they find to fill their time during the shows? Like, can't imagine. Well, anyway, they've got Mrs. Jones out there now, and she's taken over, of course. The main parts of the two brothers, Giuseppe and Adolfo, are being played by Brian. You know my friend Brian, who has the hairdressers in the high street? He has the salon Highlights, used to be Vitaldo of Florence. Brian's playing one of the brothers, and the other one, Giuseppe or Adolfo, is being played by young Charlie, you know, blonde. Attractive young fellow. He's Brian's other friend. He works at Ups and Downs, the government secret installation. Well, they call it a secret installation, though everybody knows it's there. He's in a bit of a dilemma at the moment because, well, I'll get onto that in a minute. The two twin sisters, Philanthe and Chloe, are being played by Sally Grosefield and Pat Parfitt. Well, I wasn't too keen on putting them together at first because they don't get on so well. But they've got easily the best voices. You know Sally Grosefield, who played Cinderella in the pantomime when we had the Unpleasantness. The thing is, what with Pat Parfitt being in the church choir, well, she's married. Her husband's a commercial traveller. They got the two kiddies, Nigel and Melody. She doesn't really approve of Sally being, you know, it's funny, I can't get over their brain. The four of us in the village now, what with Brian and Charlie and me and Sally, and yet if you go over Ambridge Way, there isn't anybody at all. So anyway, Pat and Sally are playing the twin sisters, but Pat said she wasn't going to have her hair cut all short like Sally's. So Sally's been wearing this wig. Mrs. Neat's done her best with it, but she looks like a Cocker Spaniel. Anyway, what with the coach being back so late from Balloon, there wasn't no chance of us having a proper dress rehearsal. Not that everybody went on the trip, of course. I mean, some of us do take the dramatic a bit more serious, but most of them went. So we had the first night last night without having had a dress rehearsal. And it's the first time we've done a show in the TocH. I thought there might be trouble before it starts when Michael Biggleswick comes in, because he's going to write a review for that new free paper that gets delivered. Anything to have a go at Ernest Jones, Mrs. Jones' husband. Well, Ernest Jones has been editing the Chronicle for years. I wasn't sure if Mrs. Jones saw him come in, because I know they haven't seen nothing of anything of anyone or of each other since Mr. Jones made her promise never to see Michael again. Mind you, she would have had trouble seeing people last night because it was absolutely packed out with everybody's relatives coming in that. I'm not playing for the piano for this show, what with having produced it. So Mrs. Randall, you know, the piano teacher, she's doing that. She's got a lovely touch. It was going quite well to start with. The first act set on board a pirate ship manned by fairies off the coast of Japan. The chorus of sailors pretty well packs the stage, especially with their great big wings that Mrs. Neat has made for them sticking out the back. Now, I made it absolutely clear from the start that though they might be pirate sailor fairies, I wasn't having any jokes about people being, you know. Anyway, they're all singing the chorus that they just start with. A jolly thing you must agree to be a fairy pirate on the sea. Anyway, as I said, it was going quite well, all things considered, until we come to the bit where all the women come on as the fairy cousins. You know that, they'll know that chorus. It's, flying wheresoe'er the air is, warm old brooks and eagles' air is, come the dainty little fairies, sing fa la la, sing boom, yeah. Well, what nobody had considered when we were doing it in the rehearsals in the big school classroom is that the stage of the TocH isn't anything like as big as the church hall used to be. So the fairy cousins are all coming on singing, only the stage is getting more and more and more crowded, and there's this terrible pushing and shoving and all that, and yeah, I'm watching it all from the back, you see. And there was this sudden terrible crash from the drums, and I thought, well, that's not in the music, surely. And when suddenly I realised it was poor Mr. Lovell from the bank. He'd been pushed all the way down the stage and come down a terrible crash on the cymbals. Well, he's got a really nasty rip in his wings. So Mrs. Neat took him off to the health centre. It used to be the cottage hospital, and he should be all right for tonight. Anyway, as soon as that scene's over, I went round to tell them they've got to be more careful, standing exactly in the straight lines we promised it. And of course, all the choruses were all in the back at that time, all chattering and I don't know which is worse. The half of them sort of chattering, and the rest of them are going shh, shh, shh. You can hear it right in the audience because there's only Brian and Charlie on stage playing the two brothers, Giuseppe and Adolfo, and then Pat and Sally come on. Oh, what I forgot to tell you is that things have really changed between Pat and Sally. See, the night of the dress rehearsal, Pat comes in a terrible state because her husband's been moaning about his dinner, and then he starts complaining at her because she's spending far more time around at the dramatic. And then he starts having a go at the two kiddies because Melody's got her new pink dress, absolutely filthy, climbing trees with Darren Chow, Mr. Chow's son from the takeaway and the new video shop. And then Melody's had a fight with her brother Nigel because he's been putting the dresses of her Cindy Don on his Action Man. So Pat's husband's been complaining about that too. And Pat just told him to stuff it and came off to the dress rehearsal. Only, of course, we all sit around till about 9:15, and there's no sign of most of them because of the coach being back late from Balloon. So eventually Sally said she's had enough and she's going off to the Queen's Arms, and she says to Pat, do you want to come too? And Pat says, why not? And the two of them go off together. Well, we're all quite surprised, but apparently the two of them just sat in the snug at the Queen's Arms till closing time. And the next thing is that Brian tells me that at lunchtime that Pat's come into the Britaldo's first thing, asking to have her hair cut off short, same as Sally's. And Brian says to him, well, what about Sally's wig? And she gives him this enigmatical smile and said, Sal's not wearing a wig. Anyway, they come in before the show like old friends, and the way they did their duet and act, well, I'll get on to that in a minute. Anyway, that's all going on while I was backstage. And when I got back to the front, if you see what I mean, old Arthur was just coming on to do Sir Roland's song. Now, a lot of people have said to me that I shouldn't have cast old Arthur as Sir Roland, but I kept thinking about the way he did the lasso dance in Me and Aloha. I mean, it was one of the highlights of the show once we got over that initial accident. And it was only because he used to really practice it over and over and over and over. So I thought, if he does that with Sir Roland's song, he'll be fine. And to give him his due, he's worked really hard on it. And he knows the words backwards, though he didn't sing them that way. The trouble was, and I should have noticed this when I was backstage, he's drinking the orange squash, the Keoloro, that Mrs. Neat puts out for them, like he's just come in off the Sahara Desert. Well, of course, he starts the song all right, with all the chorus standing behind him in the street lines, like I told them. You must know this song. It's the one that goes... The British judiciary sole beneficiary is only the well-off, you know. The system corrupt is gone uninterrupted for over a century or so. Yeah, it's so satirical. And it's fine until the third verse. And then I realised something was going wrong, because he starts going faster and faster. Though the pace isn't hurried, I sense that he's worried and feel that his spirits are falling. You can see that he's thinking of what he's been drinking, a feeling that nature is calling, and the thought of disgracing himself, causing graces, though somehow he keeps it discreet, at least in as much as his hands on his question, he steps back and forth on his feet. But now, yes, indeed, he's increasing the speed, though he's making it look very easy, and although he is hopping, there's no sign of stopping. The chorus are now looking queasy, but though he may frown still, he cannot slow down, for he knows that he's facing disaster. He's leading unheeding, you might say stampeding, and speeding up faster and faster, like a race to the death, pausing for breath, and now poor Mrs. Mallon's passed out. Well, she's always been prone, but old Arthur's not thrown in. His diction is perfect throughout, and his legs are contact, for the end is in sight, and so on to his bladder he clings, as if nothing is wrong. He has ended the song and gone running off into the wings. Well, he got off all right, and they did manage to catch Mary Mallon before she'd finished fainting, so, and just carried her off, and she's always been a bit prone, as I said. Anyway, the next thing is that Brian comes on as Giuseppe, one of the two brothers, and he sings his ballad. Oh, heavy heart, what should he do? Who should love one, but favours two? He asks the moon when day is done. Ah, what is love for more than one? He asks the moon when day is done. Ah, what is love for more than one? Well, he does it absolutely lovely. Well, he's just about to start the second verse when there's this terrible crash from out the back. Well, Miss Moss and Mr. Gregory are usually none too quiet with the crockery. But not normally like this. So I thought, well, I better go and have a look and see what's going on. Well, when I got out there, the floor is absolutely covered with a whole tray of them glass Durex coffee cups. And they're all broken all over the floor, and there's coffee powder everywhere and everything. And Mrs. Jones is standing like a man, looking like some mad woman in the middle of the room. I said to her, whatever is the matter, Prue? And she said, it was listening to that song and seeing Michael Biggleswick again. And she knew now that she really loved him. And how could she deceive her husband? And how could she choose between them? So I said, well, you're all grown up people. And why don't you just sit down and talk it through like Brian and Charlie and I did? And whatever happens, you'd better get all the cups and cleaned up quick, because the interval's coming along soon. Well, when I got back in, they were just singing the Dilemma song at the end of the act, you know. A pickle, he's in a pretty pickle. Dilemma, he's in a fine dilemma. Though other fairies take the form of foreign folk, what care he? Though thunder roll and tempest storm, he is a very proper English fairy. And the curtains come together. Well, they got stuck on one of those things, but eventually the curtains come together, and that's the end of the first half. Well, I went backstage to tell everybody how well they were doing under the circumstances, and I thought I must tell Brian and Charlie how well that last bit had gone. Well, they're both standing at the corner looking like death. Well, I said, what on earth's the matter with you two? And Brian says that Charlie had been offered promotion that day at work at Ups and Downs, the government secret installation. Well, I said that he should be looking happy about it, but Charlie said he was afraid of what would happen if he told them that he was, you know. And I said, well, don't tell them then. And he said, yes, but what if someone found out? He could be blackmailed into giving away secrets. And I said, yes, you're right. You'd better just make a clean break of it. There's nothing to be ashamed about. You just tell them. And he said, yes, but if he did that, they wouldn't give him the promotion. And I said, well, why not? And he said that they would say he was open to being blackmailed into giving away secrets. And I said, well, better not tell them then. And he said, yes, but that way he'd be opening himself up to being blackmailed into betraying secrets. Well, I said, well, Charlie, you are in a dilemma. What on earth are you going to do about it? What on earth will Charlie do about it? And what on earth will Mrs. Jones do about Michael Biggleswick and Mr. Jones? How did Pat and Sally sing their duet in the second act? And will old Arthur have to give up liquids for the duration of the run? Stay tuned for the next exciting instalment of Down in the Village.